My name is Vivian Palmer, and at 72 years old, I thought I'd seen everything life had to offer, but when my husband Thomas passed away 6 months ago, leaving me with a broken heart and an old abandoned apple orchard in Vermont, I never imagined my own flesh and blood would turn against me so cruelly. The day of the will reading remains etched in my memory like a scar that refuses to heal. The attorney's office, Mr. Hargrove, smelled of polished oak and paper. My granddaughter Charlotte, my late daughter Sarah's child, sat beside me, impeccable in her designer suit that probably cost more than all my dresses combined. Her perfectly manicured nails tapped against her leather portfolio, while Mr. Hargrove adjusted his glasses to read Thomas's will. To my beloved wife, Vivian Palmer, I leave the apple orchard property in Mapleton Valley with all its contents, the attorney read in a monotone voice. I felt my heart stop. The orchard, that neglected piece of land that Thomas had inherited from his father years ago, we had never done anything with it because it needed so much work. It had been sitting there, overgrown and forgotten for decades. To my dear granddaughter Charlotte Bennett, I leave the family home on Willow Street, all my savings, investments, and the sum total of $5 million, continued Mr. Hargrove. The silence that followed was so dense you could have cut it with a knife. Charlotte, beside me, held her breath before a triumphant smile spread across her face. I sat there stunned, unable to comprehend why Thomas had decided to leave me, only that forgotten orchard, while giving everything else to our granddaughter. There must be some mistake, I murmured, my voice barely audible. Mr. Hargrove looked at me with something resembling pity through his thick glasses. There's no mistake, Mrs. Palmer. Your husband was very specific in his instructions. We left the office in silence. The spring sun felt too bright, almost mocking. During the drive back home, a home that was no longer mine, Charlotte didn't say a word, but I could feel her satisfaction emanating like heat from an oven. That evening, as I prepared dinner as I had done for the past 50 years, Charlotte finally spoke. Grandma, we need to talk about living arrangements. I set down my knife on the cutting board, my heart pounding. What arrangements? Well, this house is mine now, and frankly, I think it's time you had your own space. I stared at her, waiting for some sign that she was joking. Charlotte, I've lived in this house for 40 years. I built my life here with your grandfather. We raised your mother here. Grandpa is gone now, she replied coldly. And this house belongs to me. You have the orchard now. The orchard doesn't have electricity, Charlotte, or running water. The roof is practically caving in. She shrugged as if my problems were trivial. Then you'll have to fix it up. I'm giving you 2 weeks to pack your things. I felt as though I'd been slapped. 2 weeks? But Charlotte, 2 weeks, she repeated, adding with an icy smile. Consider it an opportunity for independence, Grandma. You always said you wanted to spend more time in the countryside. The following days were a whirlwind of confusion and pain. I packed my personal belongings, family photographs, clothes that fit into 2 suitcases. Charlotte watched every move, like a hawk, making sure I didn't take anything she now considered valuable. Not that, she said when I tried to take the porcelain tea set that had belonged to my mother. This set has been in my family for generations, Charlotte. My mother gave it to me, and now it's part of the house. My house. On my last day, as I loaded my suitcases into my old Honda, Charlotte came out of the house. She was wearing a new dress and jewelry I didn't recognize. I hope you understand this isn't personal, Grandma, she said, though her tone suggested otherwise. Grandpa obviously had his reasons for doing this. And what do you think those reasons were? I asked, my voice breaking slightly. Charlotte approached me, and for a moment I thought she might show some compassion. Instead, her expression hardened. Maybe he finally realized you were always a burden, always depending on him, never really contributing. Perhaps he wanted to make sure that I, who actually made something of my life, got what I deserved. Her words hit me like bullets. Charlotte, I sacrificed my teaching career to raise your mother. I gave up my job because your grandfather and your mother needed me. Nobody forced you to do anything, Grandma. Those were your choices. I got into my car with shaking hands. Charlotte stood in the driveway, watching as I drove away from the only home I had known for decades. When I arrived at the orchard, the sun was setting. The place looked even worse than I remembered. The paint was peeling, windows were broken, and the porch steps creaked dangerously. But it was all I had. That first night, lying on the floor on an old blanket, looking at the stars through a hole in the roof, I cried like I hadn't cried since I was a little girl. Not just for the loss of my home, but for the loss of the granddaughter I thought I knew. How had it come to this? How had the little girl I had helped raise, whom I had loved unconditionally, become someone so cruel? But as the tears dried on my cheeks and the quiet of the countryside enveloped me, a small spark of something ignited in my chest. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was determination. If Charlotte thought I would give up, if she thought I would break, she was very wrong. She had no idea what awaited me in this old, seemingly useless orchard. She had no idea that my life was about to change forever, or that the apple trees surrounding us, dried up and forgotten, held a secret I would soon discover. The first days at the orchard were the hardest of my life. Without electricity, I relied on candles and an old flashlight I found in a dusty drawer. Without running water, I had to walk half a mile to a well that still functioned, carrying buckets that seemed to grow heavier each day. My hands, accustomed to the comfort of suburban life, became covered with blisters and cuts. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the emotional anguish. On the third day, my sister Ruth called. Her voice sounded strange, distant. Vivian, is it true what Charlotte is saying? What is she saying? I asked, though part of me already knew. She says you attacked the attorney during the will reading, that you screamed and made a scene because you wanted all the money for yourself. The phone felt heavy in my hand. Ruth, that's completely false. I never. She also says you've been harassing her, demanding money, threatening to hire a lawyer to contest the will. That's a lie, my voice broke. Ruth, I'm your sister. You know me better than that. There was a long, painful pause. I don't know what to think, Vivian. Charlotte seemed very upset when she called me. She said she's afraid of you. After hanging up, I sat on the rotting wooden floor of the orchard house and cried until I had no tears left. Charlotte hadn't just taken my home. She was systematically destroying all my other relationships. The next day, my sister-in-law Marge canceled our tradition of Sunday brunch. I think it's better if you take some time for yourself, Vivian, to reflect on things. Then, it was my cousin Diane, who had been like a sister to me. Charlotte says you've been drinking heavily since Thomas died. Maybe you should seek help. Each phone call was like a knife to my heart. Charlotte had carefully constructed a narrative where I was the villain, the greedy and desperate widow who couldn't accept that her husband hadn't trusted her with his fortune. A week after moving to the orchard, Charlotte showed up at my door. She arrived in a brand new red Lexus, wearing a coat that probably cost more than my car. Hello, Grandma, she said with a fake smile. I came to see how you're adapting. I looked at her through the torn screen door, trying to process her presence. What do you want, Charlotte? Can I visit my grandmother? She laughed, but it sounded hollow. Wow, this place really is a dump, isn't it? Look at those broken windows and that roof. My God, are you really living here? I don't have a choice. Well, I guess you'll have to make it work. She came closer and lowered her voice. You know, Grandma, I've been talking to the family about you. My stomach sank. What have you been telling them? Just the truth, that you've been very bitter since the will reading, that you can't accept Grandpa's decisions, that you've been making very nasty comments about me. Charlotte, that's not true, and you know it. She shrugged. Perception is reality, Grandma, and the perception is that you're not handling grief well. Then she turned and began walking back to her car, but stopped and looked over her shoulder. Oh, and Grandma, Ruth mentioned you might try to contest the will. Just so you know, Grandpa worked with the best attorney in the state. Everything is legally airtight. If you try anything, you'll only waste what little money you have left. After she left, I stood at that broken door for a long time, watching her car disappear down the dirt road. The reality of my situation hit me like an avalanche. I hadn't just lost my home and my family. Charlotte had systematically destroyed my reputation. That night, as I tried to repair one of the broken windows with duct tape and cardboard, I reflected on the past decades. Had I really been such a terrible grandmother? Such a terrible wife? I remembered when Charlotte was 8 and got pneumonia. I had spent 3 nights straight at the hospital, sleeping in an uncomfortable chair, holding her hand. I remembered attending all her school plays, helping with science projects, staying up late waiting for her to come home when she was a teenager. I remembered when Thomas lost his job in 2008, and I went back to substitute teaching to help keep the family afloat. I remembered how I quit that job when he found a better one, because he said it was important for someone to be home for Charlotte after her mother died. Had those things meant anything to him? Had they meant anything to Charlotte? Apparently not. 2 weeks after I moved in, my nearest neighbor, Mr. Mitchell, came to visit me. He was an older man who had known Thomas for years. "Mrs. Palmer," he said, removing his hat, "I'm so sorry about Thomas, and I'm even sorrier about what's happening to you." "Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. I've lived here for 40 years," he continued, "and I know the value of this land. Your husband was a smart man, very smart." I didn't understand what he meant at the time, but his words stayed with me like a promise of something I couldn't yet see. By the end of my second month at the orchard, I had lost 15 pounds. My hands were calloused and rough, my hair had lost its shine, and new lines had appeared around my eyes. But there was something else too. There was a hardness, a determination that hadn't been there before. One morning, while cleaning debris from the old barn, I found a door that seemed to lead to a cellar. It was partially hidden behind some old boards covered in dust. With effort, I managed to move the boards and open the door. The wooden steps creaked under my weight as I descended into the darkness with my flashlight. The cellar was larger than I expected, extending under a good portion of the barn. In one corner, several wooden boxes were carefully stacked. I approached them curiously and opened the first one. Inside were dozens of old notebooks, some so old that the pages had turned yellow and brittle. Carefully, I took one and opened it. It was handwritten in an elegant script that I immediately recognized. It was the handwriting of Thomas's grandfather, a man I never met, but whom my husband always spoke of with great respect. The pages contained detailed diagrams of trees, notes on weather patterns, and what appeared to be recipes for natural fertilizers. I moved on to the next notebook, and my heart skipped a beat. On the first page was a title written in large letters: Heirloom Baldwin Apple Variety, Cultivation Techniques and Secrets. I turned the pages with trembling hands. They were detailed instructions for cultivating a variety of apple that, according to the notes, was exceptionally flavorful, disease-resistant, and with unique nutritional properties. According to the notebook, this variety had been developed by Thomas's family over generations, but the knowledge had been lost when his grandfather died suddenly before he could pass all the secrets to his son. In another box, I found more notebooks, these written by Thomas himself. They were attempts to recreate the lost knowledge, experiments with different cultivation techniques, crosses between varieties. The last entry was dated just weeks before his death. "I think I've finally done it," he had written. "After all these years, I believe I finally recreated the Palmer Heirloom Baldwin. The grafts in the north sector are showing promising characteristics. If they work, this variety could be worth a fortune in today's market that values organic and authentic produce. Vivian will understand the value of this. She's always had patience to see things grow. Charlotte would want immediate results. She'll never understand that some riches take time to mature." I sat in that dusty cellar for hours, reading notebook after notebook, absorbing decades of family knowledge. When I finally climbed the stairs, The sun was already setting, but I felt a renewed energy that I hadn't experienced in months. That night, by candlelight, I read more of Thomas's notebooks. In one of them I found a small envelope glued to the last page. Inside was an old key and a note written in my husband's handwriting. Vivian, if you're reading this, it means you've found what I left for you. Forgive me for not telling you all this before, but I was afraid Charlotte might discover it. This key opens a secret compartment in the oldest apple tree in the orchard, the one by the well. There, you'll find something that will help you understand everything. I could barely sleep that night, anxious to discover what else Thomas had hidden. What secrets did that old apple tree hold? And why had my husband chosen such a complicated path for his inheritance? What I couldn't imagine was how that discovery would transform not just my life, but Charlotte's as well. Or how the old dried-up apple trees would bloom again under my care, bringing with them a sweet taste of justice that no one expected. At dawn, the next morning, I headed to the old apple tree by the well. It was the largest in the orchard, with a thick, twisted trunk that spoke of decades of growth. I carefully examined the tree, looking for any sign of a hidden compartment. Finally, near the base, I noticed a small irregularity in the bark. Looking closer, I saw what appeared to be a tiny keyhole, almost covered by the tree's natural growth. With trembling hands, I inserted the key I had found in the envelope. It fit perfectly. The mechanism turned with a soft click, and a small section of the bark came away, revealing a hollow inside the trunk. Within was a sealed metal box. I took it carefully and returned to the house. Once inside, I gently opened it. It contained 2 envelopes, one with my name and one with Charlotte's, plus a small cloth bag that felt like it contained seeds. I opened the envelope with my name first. Inside was a letter written by Thomas. My dear Vivian, if you're reading this, it means you found the treasure I left for you. I hope Charlotte hasn't been too cruel, but knowing her nature, she probably has been. I know you'll wonder why I did things this way, why I gave the house and money to Charlotte, while leaving you this orchard that seems worthless. The answer is simple. I know you, Vivian. I know your strength, your resilience, your ability to survive and thrive even in the most difficult circumstances. Charlotte never had to struggle for anything. We gave her everything on a silver platter, and I'm afraid that turned her into someone I don't recognize. Someone greedy, manipulative, with no real compassion for others. If I had left everything to you directly, she would have found a way to take it from you, legally or otherwise. But you, my love, have something Charlotte will never have: true inner strength. I knew that if anyone could survive in this orchard long enough to find this treasure, it would be you. Consider it a final test, one that Charlotte would never have passed. What you hold in your hands are the last authentic seeds of the Palmer heirloom Baldwin apple. I've spent decades trying to recover this variety that my grandfather developed. The trees in the north sector are almost ready to receive grafts from these seeds. If you follow the instructions in my notebooks, you'll be able to grow apples that exist nowhere in the world, with a taste and properties that will make them extremely valuable. I've discreetly contacted several potential buyers. All are willing to pay fortunes for the exclusive rights to this variety. Their information is in the secret compartment of the desk in the Orchard House study. The password is the date of our anniversary. There are more documents at First National Bank, in a safety deposit box registered in your name. The number of the box is on the back of this letter. Use it wisely. I loved you throughout all our years together, Vivian. I'm sorry for putting you through this test, but I knew you were strong enough to overcome it. Now live for both of us. With all my love, Thomas. At the end of the letter was a number, 183, and a postscript. The envelope for Charlotte contains an explanatory letter. Give it to her only when you believe she's ready to understand the lesson she needs to learn. I sat on the floor of the orchard house for a long time, reading and rereading the letter. Thomas had orchestrated all of this. The will that seemed so cruel, so unfair, had actually been his way of protecting me from Charlotte. while simultaneously giving me something she could never touch. But there was something else in his words that made me feel a mix of love and pain. He had known me well enough to know I would survive this test, but he had also known Charlotte well enough to know she would betray me. How long had he known our granddaughter was capable of such cruelty? That night, for the first time in months, I didn't feel desperate, abandoned, or betrayed. I felt something I had forgotten how to feel: powerful. Charlotte thought she had destroyed me. She thought she had won, that she had finally gotten rid of the grandmother she considered a burden. But she had no idea what I had really inherited. She had no idea that her cruelty had been exactly the test Thomas had expected her to fail. The next day, I drove to the bank in town. Safety Deposit Box 183 contained even more documents, including preliminary patents for the apple variety, correspondence with 3 different buyers, all interested in exclusive rights, and a certificate of deposit for $50,000 with a note from Thomas that simply said, "To get you started, I knew you would make it this far." As I drove back to the orchard, I couldn't help but think about Charlotte, probably in the house that used to be mine, spending the money she thought was her big victory. She didn't know that her grandmother, the woman she had treated like trash, had just become a potential millionaire. But it wasn't yet time for the revelation. First, I had to decide exactly how I wanted to use this new power, and more importantly, I had to grow those precious apple seeds that Thomas had entrusted to me. The following days were a whirlwind of quiet research. I had decided not to do anything hasty. Thomas had been meticulous in his planning, and I would be equally careful in the execution. First, I contacted a different attorney, one in the neighboring town who didn't know Charlotte. Mr. Reynolds was an older man who specialized in agricultural rights and land transactions. When I showed him the documents, his eyes lit up with professional interest. "Mrs. Palmer," he said, adjusting his glasses to better examine the papers, "this is extraordinary. Your husband had impeccable documentation here. These cultivation rights are legitimate and completely separate from any other inheritance." "What does that mean exactly?" "It means that even though your granddaughter inherited the house and money, these apple variety rights are entirely independent. They're specifically in your name and cannot be challenged or claimed by anyone else." I felt a wave of relief wash over me. "And the offers from the apple buyers?" Mr. Reynolds smiled. "Very legitimate. In fact, I know 2 of these companies. They have excellent reputations. But Mrs. Palmer, before making any decisions, I recommend getting an independent agricultural assessment. Heirloom apple varieties have significantly increased in value in recent years." Following his advice, I hired an independent pomologist to make his own assessment of the orchard. Dr. Carter was a man in his 50s with a gray beard and eyes that sparkled with enthusiasm when he talked about apples and orchards. For 3 days, I watched him walk around my property with strange equipment, taking samples, making measurements. I continued with my daily routine, maintaining the facade of the abandoned woman struggling to survive in a rundown orchard house. Meanwhile, I began to observe Charlotte's behavior more closely. It wasn't difficult to get information about her in a small town. People talked, especially at the post office and the grocery store. "That Charlotte Bennett is spending money like there's no tomorrow," Mrs. Dawson murmured in the grocery line. "3 new cars in the last month. And that trip to Europe she's planning," added her friend. "2 months in the best hotels, must be costing a fortune." "My niece works at the jewelry store downtown," continued Mrs. Dawson. "Says Charlotte's been in there 4 times buying necklaces and bracelets that cost more than my annual pension." I listened to these conversations with growing fascination. Charlotte was doing exactly what Thomas had predicted, squandering the money with no consideration for the future. A week later, Dr. Carter delivered his report to me. His smile was even wider than before. "Mrs. Palmer," he said, "your property is literally a treasure. The apple trees in the north sector are showing remarkable characteristics that align perfectly with the descriptions in these notebooks. If these trees produce the fruit I think they will, you could be sitting on an agricultural gold mine." What do you mean exactly? The current market is obsessed with heirloom varieties, authentic produce, especially if they have superior nutritional properties. If this Palmer heirloom Baldwin is as special as it seems, it could be worth a fortune, particularly if you hold the patent. He gave me advice on how to proceed with the grafts and promised absolute discretion. This kind of discovery attracts vultures, he warned. Keep it secret until you're ready. Following his advice and Thomas's instructions, I worked meticulously on the trees. It was hard work for a woman my age, but each day I felt stronger, more determined. The blisters on my hands turned into calluses, my skin tanned under the sun, and I discovered muscles I didn't know I had. 3 months after moving to the orchard, the first grafted trees began to show promising signs. Small green shoots appeared where there had been only dry branches before. It was like watching a miracle slowly unfold before my eyes. It was then that Charlotte decided to pay another visit. She arrived unannounced, this time in a silver convertible I hadn't seen before. She looked different. Something in her face had changed. There was tension around her eyes, a hardness to her mouth that wasn't there before. "Grandma," she said as she got out of the car, "I see you've been busy." Her gaze swept over the visible improvements to the orchard, the repaired roof, the new windows, the solar panels. "I do what I can," I replied calmly. "What brings you here, Charlotte? Can't I visit my grandmother?" Her laugh didn't reach her eyes. "I've been worried about you, living out here all alone." I invited her in, watching as her eyes scrutinized every detail of the renovated house. I had been careful not to make improvements too obvious, maintaining a modest appearance that didn't reveal the full extent of my resources. "Coffee?" I offered. "No, thanks." She sat down at the kitchen table, crossing her designer jean-clad legs. "Actually, I came to make you a proposition." "What kind of proposition?" I kept my voice neutral, but my heart began to beat faster. "I've been thinking," she began, "that this orchard has potential. With the current trend toward organic and rustic, it could become a tourist spot, maybe a small country inn, and I was thinking, I could buy it from you. I'd give you a good price, enough to buy a nice apartment in town, close to me. That way you wouldn't have to work so hard at your age." I looked at her steadily, trying to process what was really happening. "Why this sudden interest in the orchard, Charlotte?" "I just want to help you, Grandma. I worry about you being out here alone, working like a farmhand, when you should be enjoying your retirement." But there was something else in her eyes, something calculating that told me she wasn't being sincere. Had she discovered something about the orchard? Had she seen the renewed apple trees or heard rumors in town? "I appreciate your concern," I finally said, "but I'm quite comfortable here. This orchard gives me purpose, something to do. It's not for sale, Charlotte." Her face hardened momentarily before recovering her artificial smile. "Grandma, be realistic. This place is too big for you. How long do you think you can maintain it? Sooner or later, you'll need help. When that time comes, I'll consider it. For now, I'm fine." She stood up abruptly. "Think about it, Grandma. My offer won't last forever. I could give you, let's say, That's more than generous considering the state of the property." 50,000? I repeated, knowing that the orchard, even without the special apples, would be worth at least 3 times that amount. "As I said, it's a generous offer." "I'll think about it," I replied, knowing full well I would never accept. After she left, I slowly walked through the orchard, examining the grafted trees. What did Charlotte really know? Was it simple real estate greed? Or did she suspect something about the true value of the orchard? That night, I reviewed Thomas's documents again. One of the letters to potential buyers mentioned an estimated value for the exclusive rights to the Palmer heirloom Baldwin apple. $1 million, minimum. And that was just for the rights, not counting the value of ongoing production. Charlotte had offered $50,000 for the entire orchard. If she knew something, she clearly didn't know everything. The next 2 months passed in a whirlwind of work and careful planning. The grass continued to thrive, and some of the trees were already showing signs of what they might become. Following Dr. Carter's advice, I hired an attorney specializing in agricultural patents, Winters, who was enthusiastic about the project after reviewing the documentation. "This is extraordinary, Mrs. Palmer," she said. "If we can prove this variety has the properties described in these documents, we'd be talking about a very valuable patent." She also put me in touch with a discreet security company that installed cameras around the property. "With something this valuable," she explained, "it's better to be cautious." My life had changed dramatically. From being a displaced and humiliated widow, I had become an agricultural entrepreneur with a clear purpose. Each morning I woke up with the sun, eager to see the progress of my trees, to learn more from the old notebooks, to plan my future. Meanwhile, I continued gathering information about Charlotte. According to my sources in town, her financial situation was changing. She had put one of her cars up for sale and canceled her trip to Europe. There were rumors that she was seeking loans. "She's been at the bank almost every day," Mrs. Dawson informed me during one of our casual encounters at the market. "My cousin works there. Says Charlotte's been trying to get loans against her inheritance. Apparently, she already owes over $100,000. $100,000 in debt. In just 6 months." The pace of Charlotte's financial self-destruction was even faster than I had calculated. But what really confirmed that her world was crumbling was when I saw her at the pharmacy on a Tuesday afternoon. She looked different. Her hair, which she had always kept perfectly styled, was unkempt. Her clothes, though still expensive, looked wrinkled. But most revealing were her eyes. They had the desperate look of someone who is finally realizing the consequences of their actions. She was buying anxiety medication and sleeping pills, talking in a low but urgent voice to the pharmacist about whether her insurance would cover the cost. That evening, as I ate dinner in my now comfortable orchard house, looking out the window at the apple trees that were coming to life under my care, I received the call I had been expecting. "Grandma." Charlotte's voice sounded small, vulnerable, in a way I hadn't heard since she was a child. "Hello, Charlotte. Grandma, I need to talk to you. Can I come see you?" I looked out the window into the darkness of the orchard, feeling a strange calm. "Of course. When?" "Now. It's urgent." "All right, you know where to find me." An hour later, I heard the familiar sound of her car approaching on the dirt road. But when I went out to the porch, I saw that it was no longer the silver convertible or the red Lexus. It was a used sedan, probably 10 years old. Charlotte got out of the car slowly, as if every movement cost her an effort. As she approached the porch light, I could see she had been crying. "Grandma," she began, her voice breaking, "I've made terrible mistakes." I didn't respond immediately. I just stood there watching her, remembering all the times she had come to me with problems when she was younger, and how those visits had completely ceased when she married and decided she no longer needed me. "Would you like to come in?" I finally asked. She nodded, and I led her inside. I had prepared tea, as if I had known this conversation was coming. Charlotte sat in the chair I had set up for visitors, looking around as if seeing the place for the first time. "It's not as bad as I thought," she murmured. "You've made improvements." "I've done what I could." She sat in silence for a long moment, twisting her hands in her lap. Finally, she looked up at me. "Grandma, I'm in trouble. Serious trouble." "What kind of trouble?" "Money. I owe, I owe a lot of money, more than I can pay." "How much?" $200,000. Her voice was barely a whisper. I thought I had more time. I thought Grandpa's money would last forever. But I made stupid investments. I bought houses, cars, jewelry. I spent without thinking. I looked at her, this woman, who had been my baby, my little girl, and who had become someone I barely recognized. But now, sitting in my humble orchard house, stripped of all her previous arrogance, I could see a glimpse of the girl she used to be. "What do you want me to do?" I asked softly. I need your help, Grandma. I know I don't deserve it. I know I was horrible to you, but you're the only family I have. Tears began to fall down her cheeks, and for a moment my heart softened. This was my granddaughter, after all. The girl I had helped raise, whom I had loved unconditionally, no matter how much pain she had caused me. Charlotte, I said calmly, 6 months ago you told me to go live with the pigs. You called me a poor old lady. You humiliated me in front of your grandfather's memory, and you threw me out of the only home I had known for decades. I know, Grandma. I know, and I regret it so much. Each word seemed to pain her. You took away my family photographs, my clothes, even my mother's tea set. You said I had never contributed to anything, that I had always been a burden. Each word I spoke was like a slap to her. I could see it in her face, the way she winced with each reminder of her cruelty. And now, I continued, you come here to this orchard that you considered beneath you, asking for help. Tell me, Charlotte, what's changed? Suddenly I'm a good grandmother because you need money. No, Grandma, it's not that. I've realized what I did. I've had time to think, to see how I treated the one person who always loved me unconditionally. Her words sounded sincere, and part of me wanted to believe them. But another part, the part that had suffered silently for months, that had been humiliated and abandoned, remembered the pain too well. Do you know what I've learned living here, Charlotte? I asked her. I've learned that I can survive without you. I've learned that I don't need anyone's approval to have value. I've learned that sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones who deserve it the least. Grandma, please, I'll pay you back. When I sort out my financial problems, I'll pay you back everything you lend me, with interest. With what money will you pay me back, Charlotte? From what I've heard, you've spent almost all of your inheritance. What makes you think you'll be able to repay debts of $200,000? She fell silent because we both knew she had no answer. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out into the darkness of the orchard, where my precious apple trees were quietly growing. For months I had imagined this moment. I had fantasized about the day Charlotte would come crawling back asking for help. In my fantasies I had been hard, ruthless, giving her a taste of her own medicine. But now that she was here, seeing her truly broken and desperate, my feelings were more complicated than I had expected. Grandma, her voice was pleading, I know now that I have no right to ask you for anything, but if I don't get this money, I'm going to lose everything. The house, my car, everything. I turned to look at her. And why should I care about that, Charlotte? When you had everything and I had nothing, did you care about my welfare? No, she whispered, and I hate myself for it. The moment of truth had arrived, the moment when I had to decide what kind of person I wanted to be. I could be like Charlotte had been to me, cruel, ruthless, without compassion. Or I could be the person Thomas had seen in me, strong, but also capable of mercy when it was deserved. Charlotte, I said finally, I'm going to make you an offer. One offer. Her eyes lit up with desperate hope. I'll help you with your debts, but not as a gift, as a loan, with very specific terms. Anything, Grandma. I'll accept any terms. I smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. You haven't heard the terms yet. I sat down across from Charlotte, watching as she waited for my conditions with a mixture of hope and fear in her eyes. For months I had imagined this moment, and now that it was here, I felt a deep calm that I hadn't experienced in years. These are my terms, I began, my voice firm and clear. I'll lend you $250,000 to cover your debts and give you a small margin to start fresh. Grandma, that's more than I expected. I raised a hand to silence her. I'm not finished. The loan will be at 5% annual interest, to be repaid over 10 years. That's more generous than any bank. She nodded eagerly. I accept, of course I accept. But there are more conditions. For the next 5 years, you'll work for me. You'll come here every weekend and help me with the orchard tasks, cleaning, whatever I need, without complaints, without excuses. I saw her expression change slightly, but she nodded. Okay. And every time you come, you'll speak to me with respect. No more condescending or dismissive comments. You'll treat me like the grandmother I always was, not the burden you decided I was. Yes, Grandma. Finally, I said, rising and walking to my desk. I want you to write a letter, a complete apology for everything you did to me, not for me, but for your own growth. And I want you to read it aloud to the entire family at the next Christmas gathering. Charlotte paled. Grandma, that's humiliating. Humiliating? I looked directly into her eyes. Do you think it's humiliating to have to apologize for humiliating your own grandmother, for throwing me out of my home and spreading lies about me to the entire family? She lowered her eyes, ashamed. No, you're right. I'll do it. Good. Then we have an agreement. The next day, I transferred the money to her account. Seeing her relief when she could pay her debts gave me a strange satisfaction, not because I enjoyed helping her, but because I had taken complete control of the situation. The first weekend she came to work, she arrived dressed in old jeans and a worn t-shirt, something I hadn't seen her wear in years. Without her expensive clothes and arrogant attitude, she looked more like the granddaughter I remembered from years ago. What do you need me to do? She asked, her tone respectful for the first time in years. I need you to help me with the apple trees in the north sector. We're preparing the ground for a new season. We worked in silence for the first hour. I could see she was struggling with the manual labor, her soft hands unaccustomed to physical work, but she didn't complain. Grandma, she finally said, as we dug around one of the grafted trees, can I ask you something? Of course. How did you get the money to lend me? I don't understand how you could save so much living here, living like a poor old farmer. I finished for her. She blushed. I didn't mean it that way. I smiled, but it wasn't cruel this time. Charlotte, there are many things about me you never knew, many things you never bothered to ask. That afternoon, after she left, I sat on my renovated porch drinking tea and looking out at the orchard that I now knew contained my fortune. The trees whispered in the late breeze, and for the first time in a long while, I felt completely at peace. The following months established a routine. Charlotte came every weekend, worked without complaint, and gradually we began to have real conversations. Not the superficial interactions of past years, but honest talks about life, about mistakes, about what really mattered. One Saturday in autumn, as we were pruning some trees, she surprised me with a direct question. Will you ever really forgive me, Grandma? I paused, leaning on my pruning shears. Charlotte, forgiveness isn't something I grant or withhold like a prize. It's something that happens naturally when I see real changes. And have you seen them? Real changes? I looked at her, this 35-year-old woman who had rediscovered humility the hard way. Yes, I've seen them. But more importantly, I think you've seen them too. She nodded, wiping away a tear. I'm so ashamed of the person I was. Don't be ashamed of the past, Charlotte. Use it to be better in the future. As we worked, I noticed her gaze frequently stopping on the grafted apple trees, which now showed vigorous growth that differed from the other trees. Grandma, she finally said, these trees are different. What are you doing to them? I decided it was time to begin sharing part of the truth. They're a special variety, Charlotte. Your grandfather worked on them for years. A special variety? Like Honeycrisps or something. Something like that, but more unique. A variety that his family developed generations ago, and that was almost lost. I'm recovering them following his notes. I saw a spark of genuine interest in her eyes. Perhaps the first authentic emotion she had shown in a long time. Could I see his notes? Maybe I could help more if I understood what we're doing. I considered her request. Was Charlotte ready to know more about Thomas's plan? Or would she use this information for her own benefit? I decided to give her a partial version of the truth. I'll show you some of the basic notebooks, I replied. The rest will come with time, when the trees are more established. That evening, I showed her the first notebooks, the ones that explained the fundamentals of cultivation, but didn't reveal the full potential value of the trees or the contacts with buyers. I watched as she read with growing fascination. "This is amazing, Grandma. Grandpa was a genius. Do you really think we can recover this lost variety?" "I believe we already are," I replied calmly. "Look at the trees in the north sector. They're responding exactly as the notes described. And what will we do when they bear fruit? Sell them at the local farmer's market? Perhaps something more than that. These apples could be special, Charlotte. They could have value not just as fruit, but as a historic variety." I saw her mind beginning to process the possibilities. But to my surprise, she didn't immediately ask about the monetary value. Instead, she said something that momentarily left me speechless. "I'd like to be part of this, Grandma. Not just for whatever money it might generate, but because it's Grandpa's legacy. It's something he left for us." For the first time, I felt that perhaps, just maybe, Charlotte was beginning to understand. Christmas arrived, and with it came the first family gathering since my exile. Charlotte had kept her promise and written a complete letter, apologizing not just to me but to the entire family for the lies she had spread about me. When she read it aloud in Ruth's living room, with the entire family present, the silence was absolute. I could see tears in the eyes of several relatives who had believed her stories and turned their backs on me. "Grandma," Charlotte concluded, looking directly at me, "I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I hope someday I can earn it." After dinner, Ruth approached me, her eyes full of regret. "Vivian, I can't believe we were so gullible. We should have known you better. People believe what they want to believe," I replied simply. "But what's important is that now they know the truth." That spring, exactly 1 year after moving to the orchard, the first grafted apple trees blossomed. It was an extraordinary sight, white flowers with a unique intense fragrance that filled the air. Dr. Carter, who had continued to advise me discreetly, was enthusiastic. "Mrs. Palmer, this is exceptional. The scent of the blossoms already indicates we're dealing with something special. If the fruits match what the notebooks describe, we could be looking at a major agricultural discovery." The months passed, and the moment we had been waiting for arrived. The first fruits began to form on the grafted trees. They were different from any apple I had seen, slightly smaller than common ones, with a skin of a more intense and brilliant reddish gold tone. Charlotte was as excited as I was. She had faithfully kept her promise to work every weekend, and over time her interest in the project had grown into a genuine passion. She had begun researching on her own about heirloom apple varieties and potential markets. "Grandma," she told me one day as we examined the developing fruits, "I've been thinking, this variety could have enormous value if it's truly unique, not just for selling the apples directly, but for licensing the variety to select growers." I looked at her in surprise. It was exactly the kind of strategic thinking Thomas would have had, the kind of long-term vision I had never associated with my impulsive granddaughter. "Have you been researching this?" I asked. "Yes," she replied enthusiastically. "I've read everything I could find about plant patents and agricultural licensing. I even spoke with a friend who works in commercial development. Of course, I didn't specifically mention what we had here. It was just a hypothetical conversation." "I'm impressed," I said sincerely. "It seems you've found a new interest." "It's more than that, Grandma. It's like I finally understand what Grandpa was trying to teach me. The value of patience, of hard work, of building something lasting instead of seeking immediate gratification." Her words resonated deeply with me. Was it possible that Thomas's test was working exactly as he had envisioned? That this experience was transforming Charlotte, not just outwardly but inwardly? Finally, the day came when the first apples ripened. We ceremoniously picked the first one, Charlotte and I together. It was perfect, small but heavy, with an intense color and an aroma that filled the air even before peeling it. "Should we?" Charlotte asked, holding the fruit as if it were a jewel. I think your grandfather would have wanted us to be the first to taste it. Carefully, she peeled the apple, separated a slice, and offered it to me. She took a second slice for herself, and on the count of 3, we tasted it simultaneously. The flavor was indescribable. Sweet, but with a complexity I had never experienced in any other fruit. It had notes of honey, flowers, and something deeper that I couldn't identify. The texture was perfect, juicy but firm, without hard fibers. My God, Grandma, whispered Charlotte, with tears in her eyes. It's, it's the best apple I've ever tasted in my life. It's like I'm tasting sunshine itself. Your grandfather would be so proud, I said, also fighting back tears. We did it, Charlotte. We recovered the Palmer heirloom Baldwin. In the weeks that followed, Dr. Carter confirmed what we already knew. The apple was exceptional, not only in taste, but also in nutritional properties. It had unusually high levels of antioxidants and beneficial compounds that made it unique. With Ms. Winter's help, we initiated the process of officially patenting the variety. We also began discreet conversations with some of the buyers Thomas had identified years ago. The interest was immediate and overwhelming. One of the buyers, a high-end organic food company, offered $3 million just for the exclusive distribution rights in the country. Another, a cooperative of ecological farmers, proposed a licensing agreement that could generate steady income for decades. One afternoon, as we reviewed the different offers, I decided it was time to share the whole truth with Charlotte. I handed her the envelope that Thomas had left for her, the one I had found along with the seeds. "What is this?" she asked, taking the envelope curiously. "A letter from your grandfather. He left it for you, for when you were ready to read it." I watched as she read, seeing how her expression changed from curiosity to understanding, and finally to a mixture of pain and regret. "He knew?" she said at last, her voice barely audible. "He knew exactly how I would behave. He knew I would treat you badly, that I would waste the money. He knew your weaknesses, Charlotte, as he knew mine, but he also saw your potential, your capacity to grow and change. You knew all this time? You knew the real value of the orchard from the beginning?" I nodded. "I discovered it a few months after moving here. Your grandfather left clues that he knew I would find, but that you wouldn't have looked for. Why didn't you tell me when I came asking for help? You could have gotten revenge, humiliated me, and what would that have accomplished? What kind of lesson would that have been?" Charlotte stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the orchard where the apple trees gleamed with their golden red fruits. "All this time I thought I was making a sacrifice working here, paying my debt to you. But really, you were giving me an opportunity I didn't deserve. Everyone deserves a second chance, Charlotte. The question is what we do with it." She turned to face me, her eyes filled with a new determination. "I want to continue with this, Grandma. I want to help you turn the Palmer heirloom Baldwin into everything it can be. Not for the money, but because I finally understand what Grandpa was trying to teach me." And what was that? That the most valuable things in life are those that require patience, care, and constant love. Like these trees, like a family. I smiled, feeling a deep peace. "I think Thomas would be very proud to hear you say that." That fall, we signed an agreement with the Farmers Cooperative, establishing the foundation for what would become a thriving, sustainable venture. The Palmer heirloom Baldwin soon became known in exclusive culinary circles as an exceptional fruit, and requests for growing licenses began arriving from across the country. Charlotte proved to be a surprisingly capable business partner. Her background in law and her newly discovered passion for agriculture made her the perfect person to handle the legal and commercial aspects of the business. Together, we transformed the old orchard into an operation that was modern but respectful of traditions. We expanded the orchard, built facilities to process and pack the apples, and even opened a small visitors center where people could learn about the history of the Palmer heirloom Baldwin. One day, almost 2 years after the will reading, Charlotte made an unexpected proposal. "Grandma, I've been thinking. The house in town is too big for me alone. And you're here at the orchard, running everything. Why don't you move back to the house with me? Or better yet, why don't we sell the house and build a new one here, at the orchard? One where we can both live close to the trees. I looked at her, searching for any sign of manipulation or ulterior motives. But all I saw was sincerity. Are you sure, Charlotte? That house has been your home all your life. It's just a house, Grandma. What we've built here, this orchard, this business, this renewed relationship, that's what's truly valuable. Home isn't a place, it's the people you share it with. Her words moved me deeply. This woman standing before me was so different from the selfish, cruel creature who had thrown me out of my home almost 2 years ago. I think I'd like that, I finally replied, to build something new, together. The process of designing and building our new home on the orchard was an unexpected joy. We worked side by side with the architect, ensuring that the structure respected the natural environment and integrated with the orchard. It would have two separate but connected wings, giving each of us our own space while sharing the common areas. During construction, Charlotte surprised me one day with a revelation. Grandma, I've decided to use part of my savings to start a foundation. What kind of foundation? I asked. One that helps family farmers recover and preserve endangered fruit and vegetable varieties. I'll call it the Thomas Palmer Foundation, in honor of Grandpa, because he understood how important it is to preserve our roots, our heritage. I hugged her, unable to express in words what I was feeling. Thomas had been right. The test he had designed had not only ensured my well-being, but had also transformed our granddaughter into the person he always knew she could be. The house was completed just as we were harvesting the second full season of the Palmer heirloom Baldwin. Demand had grown exponentially, and we now had a waiting list of buyers eager to taste this unique variety. The day we moved into the new house, I found an envelope in my new bedroom. Inside was a letter from Charlotte. Dear Grandma, she wrote, I can never fully make up for the harm I did to you, nor thank you enough for the second chance you gave me, but I want you to know that each day I try to be better, to be more like you, strong, patient, compassionate, even when it would be easier to be cruel. Grandpa knew what he was doing when he left you this orchard. He knew you would see what he saw, not an abandoned piece of land, but potential, possibility, life waiting to be awakened. Thank you for teaching me to see the same way. With all my love, Charlotte. That evening, sitting on the porch of our new home, looking out at the orchard of apple trees gleaming under the moon, I thought about the extraordinary journey I had traveled. From being a displaced and humiliated widow, I had become the creator of a legacy that would endure for generations. But even more valuable than the financial success or recognition was the rebirth of my relationship with Charlotte. I had gotten her back, not as the girl I once knew, but as a mature woman who finally understood the value of family, of hard work, of patience. And as the stars shone above us, I felt Thomas's presence, not as a sad ghost, but as a warm, comforting force. He had planned all this, had seen beyond the surface, had trusted in my strength, and in Charlotte's capacity to grow. You were right, my love, I whispered to the stars. Some things just need time to ripen, like the sweetest apples. The legacy of the orchard wasn't just a unique variety of fruit or a thriving business. It was a lesson about life itself, that even from the bitterest situations can emerge an unexpected sweetness, that patience and perseverance can transform seemingly barren ground into a flourishing garden, and that sometimes what appears to be the end of a story is simply the beginning of a better one.